Hi, thank you for joining me. Tonight I want to speak about cueing and the spectrum of cueing that I see among instructors. I tend to see newer instructors who aren't sure what to say at points in their class and not speaking or saying the cues that I think would be so valuable for their class. And then I start to see some instructors who start to be more advanced start cueing too much, especially vocally and auditorially cueing too many cues for participants. So I think there's a spectrum of not enough cueing and then way too much cueing, and it can kind of get annoying at a point. So what I tend to see in class, physically see in class, is that newer instructor, an instructor who's just hasn't progressed their cueing and their teaching to the point where it starts to just come naturally, the things that they say. And there are moments where they're like doing a bicep curl and just going, and then there's silence. They've told you what exercise needs to happen and maybe what muscle group is working, but during the actual exercise, it's just reps and silence. So that's a missed opportunity to bring the experience to the next level. Then I see on the other spectrum, some people don't even get the participants exercising because they're too busy explaining what's going to happen, and the participants are just waiting. So they just say, okay, everybody put your weights down, time to do bicep curls. So everyone's standing there watching as the instructor is like, you're gonna extend your arm, and then you're gonna rotate the weight about 30 degrees, lift the arm up to curl the bicep. Your triceps are extending, your bicep is flexing. As we bring the arm down, like way too much talking. So it's fine to layer cues in and to play with different cues. So that's why I feel like going to classes has made a night and day difference on my own cueing, because I've heard different cues and people have a way of tweaking them to make them sound really interesting. It may be the same cue I use all the time a million times, but they say it in a different order, a different way. Works better for my participants when I say it that way. So highly recommend taking classes and hearing from other instructors what they're cueing about. But I want to give you guys 10 strategies that are super simple and super easy to follow that I think will help you cue just the right amount. Also provide variability to your cueing so that you're giving the most to participants in any class. So the first strategy is to change your cues, especially on like a cardio push or an intense push or a high intensity interval of some kind, is change your cues to questions. So instead of saying, push as hard as you can right now, go, 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 saying something like, can you add one more gear on a bike? Can you do 5 more reps before our 10 seconds is over? Something along those lines to ask questions so that they're reassessing themselves and going, hey, you know what? I think I can increase my intensity a little bit, and here's how I can. Here's how much I can. So asking them questions instead of just giving them the answers or motivating them with yelling. So you can also ask those questions in a way where it makes them listen a little bit more, because they're like, oh, hey, she asked me a question, or he asked me a question. I have to really listen and think about it myself. So it puts it on them a little bit more responsibility on them. Second, cue, especially in layering different moves from that involve lower body and upper body, is instead of going, like let's say you're in a plank and you have them straightening their arm, you would not go, make sure your wrist is flexed, your shoulder is pushing back, or you're pulling your shoulders back, your elbow is bent slightly. You would, ideally you'd move up the arm. So you'd go from wrist to elbow to shoulder. So in relative to the whole body, if you're doing lower body and upper body, you talk about the ankle where it should be, the knee where it should be, the hip where it should be, all those alignment cues from foot to head or head to foot. Just has to be one direction or the other, instead of going shoulder, knee, ankle, neck, all over the body. So it can get confusing. Remember to go from foot to head, directional cueing as far as the body. And then talk about the muscles that are working. So we may know what a bicep curl means, but physically point to the muscle that's working on the body. Maybe talk about the muscle that's eccentrically working. So it's finding, while I'm giving you all these strategies of things you can add to talk to your participants about, it's also knowing when to not talk too much, or if you're repeating an exercise, knowing when you can, if you're repeating the exercise, you've already said everything most likely that needs to be said. So talk about the muscles working, talk about the alignment. So along with the order of the alignment that you need to talk about, make sure you're talking about alignment. So I like to layer, and I've said this in other videos, I like to layer, what is the exercise? Then I say how many reps, how long, how intense, how much rest. Then I start talking about alignment cues, because they need to get an idea of what to expect and what's happening, and maybe some of the more advanced people can get started while you start explaining the exercise to the people who are newer in class. So exercise name first. So talk about alignment, and then give real life benefits. What are the benefits that they are going to take out of this class that are going to help them outside of the class that they're taking? So what I tend to bring back too is when people come up to me after class and talk about, especially in like Pilates or yoga, I really wasn't very sore after class, and shouldn't I be sore, or was I not benefiting because I wasn't sore? And I'm upset when I hear that, because there are times where I think people assume or think that they need to be completely destroyed in order to feel like they got a workout. And then guess what? We're doing the opposite, because they can't do everything in their daily life that they normally should do because they're completely destroyed. So I feel like there's a spectrum we have to find where we're making people fitter. We're also making them healthier and happier for their daily life. So talk about when you're doing balance work with them, it's not fun. People get frustrated. Talk about how this is going to prevent injury, how it's going to prevent falls, it's going to prevent embarrassment over life. So give real life benefits. On that, humor is huge. So when you talk about balance or do certain training things that aren't so fun, start to bring in humor. And it could be small, but I highly recommend that you plan your humor. So if you've used humor before in your classes, it's gone over well, it's been fine. By all means, continue to do that. But I think humor can sometimes people can take it a little too far, to the point where it starts to sound unprofessional. So plan it out, listen to it for yourself, and make sure it sounds professional, it sounds useful and funny. The effect is funny, but you also don't want to be offending anybody, and sometimes things can just roll out of our mouth not the way we were planning on having them roll out of our mouth. So be aware of that. In your humor, you plan it out. So a good example of my humor tonight that I took into my cycling class was really fun. All I said was, pretend like you're on a vacation, and we talked about a nice kind of recovery song, and then I brought in the next song, which was going to be a higher intensity song, and I said, sorry guys, hate to ruin your vacation, but here comes our next song. So it got them ready and laughing for the next song, because their vacation was over in class. So plan those moments, and you can just make it that much better. From humor, make sure that you're taking the time to play with tactile cues. So from visual and auditorial cues, when I see newer instructors, as I've said before, I see them stuck on the stage or stuck in the front of the room. They don't move around to participants. They don't give them that added attention. So give your participants that added value by going around the room, asking people if you can touch them, and if you can, give them a little bit more of an edge. Sometimes you can, just someone pulling your shoulders back can make a huge difference to understanding what they really want from you, than from them just yapping at you from way in front of the room. So add those visual and auditorial cues, go straight into that tactile cue, or try to walk around the room. Next is pregnant pauses. I heard this from a Schwinn training with Skip Jennings, and he is he almost teaches like a preacher, the way he kind of speaks. And I love how he uses this to his advantage. So along with all of these great strategies to provide cueing to your classes, where can you take breaks and encourage them to listen to you more by just pausing? So saying something really important is only going to mean so much in a class if you stop talking. When you keep going and going and you pick up the pace of your words, and people just start to tune you out, because they're already trying to eliminate all the thoughts that they have from their day and on. So try to add pregnant pauses into your class. Maybe you plan those out. From pregnant pauses, adding to your cueing, plan times that you encourage them to be mindful. So take time. So while you're doing those pregnant pauses, maybe you encourage a moment for yourself to not talk. Like, I have to plan times in my class where I'm like, okay, during this song, I'm going to give these cues, and then I'm going to shut up. I'm going to stop talking. So it's important for us to let them get into their bodies, get into their heads, and really notice, what are they thinking. If you catch people starting to look at the clock, I call them out sometimes. I won't call out that specific person, but I'll say to the class, around this time, we tend to start to look at the clock, start to think, how much do I have left in the tank? Start to live in the present and enjoy the moment. Enjoy the fact that you're here healthy and happy and motivated enough to come to a cycling class on a Thursday night. I love using that cue and bringing that mindfulness in, and then bringing them into their body. Last but not least, layer attention to the core and the spine. So if you're looking for cues, you've talked about the muscle that's working, you've talked about all the things that are important, maybe you're in your second round of the same exercise and you're running out of ideas. I cannot stress enough the importance of making sure someone's spine and core are in the right place or are connected and strengthening correctly. So another plan for one of my videos soon is how to layer and encourage and to even see as an instructor how do you develop the eye to catch if someone is using their core when they need to on really important exercises, and just really identifying the importance of that. When I go to classes and I see an instructor look at someone and they know something really is off with what their form looks like, but their knees aren't over their toes. Let's say they're doing like a side lunge, knees aren't over the toes. Things generally look all right, but they know their head is totally forward, their shoulders are rounded, everything up here is not going so hot, and they're not engaging their core or they're strengthening their upper back. So those are things that we need to help them use outside of class. So along with an exercise that's more lower body focused, don't let them forget about that upper body and that posture, because the last thing we need is them to leave from our group fitness classes totally hunched over, totally looking like they aren't fit at all because their posture is so bad. So take those 10 cue strategies, ask questions, go from foot to head, head to foot, know your direction, talk about the muscles that are working, don't forget alignment, add the real life benefits that they're gonna take away from this class, plan your humor. After visual and auditory cues, add tactile cues. Don't forget pregnant pauses. Plan times you encourage them to be mindful, and layer the attention of the spine and the core and that stability. And I hope you guys find that you're never short of cues and that you know when to not talk, know when to not cue too much.